Welcome to the Handled Internally podcast. I'm Ed Tate from BlueBombers.com, joined as always by my co-host Darren Cameron, the Blue Bombers Director of Senior and Public Relations and Chief Consigliere, and also our special guest this week, Dalton Schoen, All-Star receiver, two-time All-Star receiver, CFL Rookie of the Year 2 years ago, and freshly signed again for another season with the Blue Bombers. Darren, you can start.
And a fresh haircut.
Yes, that is
First
true.
thing I said to him when I saw him in the store, what the happened to your hair?
A little worried people aren't going to recognize me now. Lost the flow.
Yeah.
There's an icebreaker opening line.
Yeah. Well, just revisiting the morning. Yeah, so, man, you're back. You're back in Winnipeg for doing some appearances. What are we doing?
First of all, excited to be back, to be signed with the team again, and here for the weekend, do a little bit of appearances, see some people. Excited.
Yeah, anyway, so good, man. It's good to have you back. Obviously, we'll get into free agency in a second. Let's maybe talk about the end of the season, kind of what we've been doing. The first couple of guys that were on for the winter here. Maybe even let's go back to you had a little different end of the season than most people.
Yeah.
So maybe let's go back to the BC game out there. It was a wild game that you weren't unfortunately able to finish, but kind of take us through that and then the final stretch around there.
Yeah, for starters, wild game that we were able to miraculously come back with the win there at the end. I was feeling a lot of emotions because you're like, hey, this was an incredible win. Also was experiencing the injury, going through a lot of pain there, a lot of unknown of if I would even be able to play again that last season. A lot of rehab recovery towards the end of the year. Was fortunate to be out there for the Grey Cup. Obviously, it didn't go the way we wanted, but it was good to be a part of that, be back out there playing the game. And then since then, similar to a lot of guys, I'd imagine taking a lot of time off to just recover from the normal bumps and bruises that we all experience, as well as the injury I suffered in the season. So it's good to get away a little bit and focus just on like the actual strengthening, rehabbing of it all. Kind of coming more to the end of that. It's been good to get back out, running around, doing more of my full activity stuff like that.
So you got hurt, I think, in the fourth quarter. I think it was the fourth quarter of that game.
It was,
and then,
yeah.
Because you came right past me walking off. Obviously, didn't look good. You were supposed to hobbling off. Yeah. But you never know. At that point, I didn't see what happened.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not exactly a medical expert. Shockingly, so
You're not.
No. Believe it or not. So, you were supposed to stay out there, weren't you, or something?
Well,
and
so
then,
it happened.
we were on the bye
before.
after.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, for the actual injury, it happened to play before, and then I tried to stay in because, as a football player, you're like, oh, no, I'm fine. That's
Right.
just a scratch. But then I like jumped off the field, then, talking with the trainers and everybody after the game, they're like, yeah, there might be an issue here. So I was supposed to stay out there because we were on bye. My parents were out at the game. I was just going to stay with them and fly home to Kansas City from Seattle, actually. But then, obviously, that went out the window and flew back with the team and got it looked at and all of that and started the process of rehabbing because pretty much as soon as we realized what was going on, we were like, we're up against the clock for the Grey Cup here, or we were actually hopeful for West Final, but knew we were going to have to give it everything we had. So
Yeah.
That's let's take a deeper look at the injury process, because I think a lot of people say, well, he's got an injury and he'll go in for a little bit of treatment and there's not much you can do, but it's kind of consumes you, doesn't it? Like it's every moment I got to be doing this. Because you are thinking I want to play in the Western Final or the Grey Cup, and so you're really all in on that mentally too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much have to give it everything you got, and it's tough when there's periods of time within that healing process of there's only so much you can do from a physical standpoint, but there's an infinite amount of things you can do from a time standpoint and doing just more recovery, more stuff to strengthen the intrinsic muscles, stuff like that. And so you're doing as much of that as you can with, like you just said, that one goal in mind of I want to get back out there in the playoffs.
When did you get the green light? Like is it during Grey Cup week or did you know before that?
We got a soft green light before going there. We went out on the field and did some tests and stuff like that, and stuff went decently well. But then as we were traveling to Hamilton for the Grey Cup, we didn't know exactly how my body would recover from that and respond to that. So it was kind of day by day. The rest of that week to see if my body was going to get back into a window where, all right, we can go play this game. And so really, I mean, it's not until right before the game that for sure you're going to go. Now, I'm planning the whole week as if I'm going to play. You're doing all the prep mentally, doing all the walkthroughs and stuff that you can. But it's not until those final things that you do and the final tests out there on the field for pregame that you're like, all right, we're for sure going.
We can touch on a little bit more. I don't want to jump over Darren here, but when we had Pat Neufeld on, he spoke about the post game, and Darren did too. And they never been in a locker room like that before. And Patty talked about smashing his helmet, and guys are crying and screaming. Like, so what did you go through? Because you had invested, not that you had invested more, but the injury on top of all the other stuff.
It's a tough scene in that locker room. Yeah. And it's weird that, I guess for me almost, the vibe was different from the year before. Like, the year before, it just, I don't know, they both felt horrible, but it's almost like you're left with this feeling of, like, how did this happen? And the first one, like, there was no thought in my mind that we weren't going to win. And then when you don't, it's just like, it's almost like you lost a part of your body. Like, it's just, you don't know how to even handle it. And then last year, I was more thinking, like, how did this happen again? Because now for me, 2 years in a row, we lose in the Grey Cup. And, I haven't been on those teams that won and got the job finished. And so there's just a lot of thoughts going through your mind, a lot of pain. I guess the only benefit is there's that shared misery, and you got all your brothers around you that are also going through it. And so it's a tough feeling to get through. I think probably time is the only thing that really heals that. And now that mental image and that drive of how do we get back to that point, and how do we finally get it done.
So when we got to Hamilton, like, obviously you didn't practice all week, and then you didn't go for pregame. Like, what was going on?
In terms of what I was doing all week,
yeah.
So I was in the pool at the hotel twice a day, wearing BFR, blood flow restriction, trying to strengthen the foot, strengthen the muscles, and then just try to get my body, like I said, in that operating window, not to mention all the other stuff I'm doing in the treatment room from like just a recovery type standpoint, E-stim, ice, everything you can think of in that room, massages. They did a video even one day of like what all I was doing, and it's just like one thing after another, just pretty much recovery. And then I was going to practice, to obviously follow the game plan, try to get those mental reps, like I said, but that's hard to just get mental reps, especially from a timing standpoint and stuff like that. And then, like you said, even for the game, I couldn't actually go out there for warm-ups at the game because of what we had to do from a medical standpoint in the locker room before the game. So did all that, did my own warm-up. I think someone else, Jesse Briggs was in the locker room with me because he had a similar situation. And so we were in there together, trying to do our own little warm-up in the locker room, talking through the game and stuff like that. And it's tough when you run out there and you haven't played in 6 weeks and it's the Grey Cup, but
that's what I was going to say. Like we obviously got to the stadium knowing you were playing, but without a warm up or anything. Really, the first time you stepped on the field was when the game was starting, or when we came out for the game.
It's true. I think that's kind of a situation where you got to rely on the people around you too, and just trust that guys are going to help you through it, because something as simple as just being in the huddle. I hadn't done that for 6 weeks. I've done the walkthroughs, but it's obviously different when it's a full game experience. But it was good though to be back out there. Like I said, after 6 weeks, I think when you invest so much in this sport and this is what you do, to be away from it for an extended period of time is hard.
Yeah. So let's get into what the last few months has been like, man. It's been obviously crazy for both sides of the equation here, but what's it been like for you? Obviously a stressful time.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this right after I had re-signed, but the goal in my mind was always to be back here, to re-sign with the team. I was hopeful to get that done months in advance of free agency, just because I didn't really want to have to go through that process. Now, obviously, things don't always work out in getting the deal done before, and so go into that free agency window, and that's tough times when you're talking to all these teams, still talking to you guys as well too, and trying to evaluate all the options and see what's going to be the best fit and what's going to work the best. And I think in the back of my mind it was always I wanted to be here, and that was kind of the only option I was letting myself think about. Maybe
take us inside that negotiating window a little bit, Dalton, because there's this idea in my head at least that when the window opens, you're kind of sitting on your couch waiting, the phone call rings. Oh, they're offering me this much. Oh, you're offering me that much. I'll just weigh one against the other. And it's sort of, I'm in a good spot here. But there's so much stress in that, right?
There's a lot of stress, yes, for sure, because, and I mentioned this earlier too, you're not in the phone call with the offers, so to speak, for the most part. That's typically taking place between your agent and the GM and stuff like that. Now, as far as when the window opens, first of all, we need to talk to whoever comes up with this schedule, because it opens on a Sunday morning at like 11 o'clock, which is just horrible timing in my opinion. And that for me was the first time where I really had to sit there and be like, I might have to go somewhere else. You know, obviously I didn't want to, and that thought had really never crossed my mind from end of November all the way until February 4th or whatever it is that the window opens. And so, yeah, it's a Sunday morning, and you know, your phone just starts ringing, and usually it's the GM of a team saying, hey, want to establish, you know, a connection with you, blah, 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 we're interested. And then, you know, he hangs up and immediately your phone rings again, and it's the head coach of that same team. You talk to them for a little bit, and then you hang up and your phone rings again, and it's the offensive coordinator of that team. And so there's all these people who want to talk to you, which at times is nice for sure. You know, it's an interesting spot, and I said this as well. For me, I had never been in a spot where I was wanted like that from a recruiting standpoint before. And so that was nice. But then at the same time, in the back of my mind, you know, I knew I wanted to be here. And what you're hearing from all these teams is nice, and it's all this interest. But at the end of the day, from what my agent was telling me, what they could provide financially, it wasn't head and shoulders above, you know, what I could have here. And so obviously it was a no-brainer for me to be here. But like you said, also, it's not necessarily teams are just calling you. It's like, oh, hey, here's your offer and stuff like that. It's more, oh, well, we'd probably be in the ballpark of this. And so it's like really hard to evaluate, because it's like, what is your guys' true, you know, number and feelings on me and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then, so Darren, what's the club doing at the same time? Because the minute it gets to the window, then there's a real fear that, well, we could be out of this.
Yeah, I mean, the conversations between Dalton and I went on for, you know, dating back to early January. You know, kind of just having honest conversations about what would be best for him. I don't want to speak too much unless he's comfortable with that. But, you know, just I can't even remember what day that was, like a Monday, I think. And was that right when the window opened that we started to get that done? I can't even, or was that the end of the window?
I mean, those whole couple days was
yeah.
But,
so
it was the beginning.
It was the beginning. Yeah. I mean, the thing is like, you know, I think guys have a pretty good sense of where the possibilities are. Like, let me ask this: so you were involved with, like, talking to a bunch of what's they're selling you on culture?
Yeah.
In one team's case, it's your relationship with their quarterback. Like, what, you know, kind of what's that whole thing like?
Yeah, you know, it's like I said, those teams started calling, and there was interest from a handful of teams. I would say significant interest from a couple, one of them being Ottawa, just because of the fact that Drew was signed there. And, you know, he's obviously a guy who I had a great relationship with the past few years here. I believe in him a lot as a player, and he's an even better person than that, and just his football mind. And so they obviously knew of that connection, so they were selling that pretty hard. Sure. And obviously Drew was recruiting me pretty hard. And he's a guy who, you know, like I said, I believe in. I think he's going to be successful. And so that connection was there, and they were pushing that really hard. But at the end of the day, like I said, there was too much here that I couldn't afford to give up to pursue something like that. But once we hit that window point, you know, that was a team that my agent was looking at and saying, hey, this could be a good opportunity. You know, Hamilton was another one where talking to their head coach, and he's trying to recruit me pretty hard. And so when you're getting recruited hard like that, you know, you're trying to evaluate all the options, yeah. Like I said, and like I said, there wasn't a lot of firm, you know, things to evaluate off of. It's a lot of feel and how are the conversations going and stuff like that. And then at the same time, you know, I'm having all these conversations with you, and I think that was probably on that Monday night, which would have been the second day after the window had been opened. And at that point, you have a pretty good idea of who's interested, because if they haven't called you at that point with the window being open for 2 full days, they probably aren't super interested. And like you said, I mean, me and you had been having conversations throughout the whole process. I think it was kind of all hands on deck, because I was talking with Zach too, talking with Dembski, a ton of guys still on the team, just to try to get everyone to do their part to get this thing done.
I was going to ask you about that. So at some point, Darren, when this is unfolding, you want to lock this in, right, obviously. But is there a point where you start to worry about, wait a minute, we don't want to bombard him and have 50 guys from in the building here calling him, or is that how you put the full court press on?
No, we're not too concerned about that, at least not for me. No, I mean, everybody wanted him back.
So then how do you get puts this over the top that it gets done beyond Like I'm asking.
Well,
both
I
of you.
think. Well, I called him Sunday night after talking to Kyle, and we spent 40 minutes on the phone. And I'm not saying that was the Steeler. He can answer that, but I mean,
I think speaking of what you're saying, in terms of, because that's what I was seeing more from other teams, is like you said, that full court press and having you talk to a ton of people within the organization. And what I took away from that was they were more trying to sell me on, hey, we can do this, like from an organizational standpoint, this is the culture either we have or we're trying to build, and, this is how we see you fitting into our offense and doing this and that. You guys didn't have to do that for me because I already know all of that here. I've been a part of this culture and this organization, and I've been a part of an offense where I was fortunate to contribute the last 2 years, and I kind of knew what those pieces were going to look like already. And so that's, like I say, once I heard that from all these other teams, it was kind of more like they're trying to sell me on the fact that they can provide what I have here. But if I already know I have that here and I'm confident in that, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to leave.
Is there some point, though, Dalton, where teams can make these promises and that you've got the culture here that you put a lot of value in, but at some point the price point is going to be, if they come in and say, we're going to give you this X much more, then isn't that part of it too? Or you think, man, I can't say no to this.
That's definitely part of it. I think that comes down to everyone's personal thoughts on that, and it's kind of like at what price point above what Winnipeg can offer do I leave, because I think all of our free agents understand the fact that, it's both a good and a bad thing. We have so many talented players, so that's awesome. But at the end of the day, we have a tight cap space in this league, so there's only so much money that can go around. So that's kind of, what it comes down to is at what price point do you feel comfortable giving up an incredible situation, a great fan base, a great organization, great culture for me, a great group of receivers to play with, a great quarterback, all the other benefits that come with being a part of this team. What is that worth to you dollar-wise?
Yeah, I find it interesting. Sorry, Darren. This culture thing, because for the people that, like, I'm in the building, but I'm not in over there, it's kind of a mystery, and everybody talks about it, and it's a selling point for this club. And that other teams are trying to say, well, we can have the same culture as them, or we're going to build it the same way they do. And yet it's kind of a mystery to me. I know it's a tight room, but what is it? What does the culture thing mean? It seems so vague in a way.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, it's hard to describe sometimes. I think it's that FIFO mentality that we talk about all the time, and I think guys usually kind of just leave it set at that. I think the best way you can describe it, though, is just by looking at the actions of the people, and look at what Brady was willing to give up to be back here. Look at, me, all these other guys who, for a lot of the older guys, year in and year out, are making sacrifices on their contract to be here because they know how special it is to be a part of that. And, I think it translates to on the field, obviously, and you see how successful we've been on the field, and then that's also something you want to be a part of as a player. I don't really know what competitor wants to take more money and then go be a part of a team that's not going to be able to compete all summer long, all fall long. So that's definitely a big component of it as well. But it sounds cliche, but it's just that brotherhood, and that family feel. And again, I think it's one of those things that you hear about it, but it doesn't even come close to it once you actually experience it.
It's interesting because I think out of all those conversations over the month and a half, a lot of them towards the end were about not necessarily selling them on coming back here. That didn't really have to happen. It was more so having like life conversations about what is, is happiness worth a certain amount, and this is what, and maybe if you get a this offer, then maybe it is best to go. It depends on who it is, and he really trusts me with kind of bouncing these ideas off each other. I think that kind of helped his mindset too. And one of the things that he said to me shortly before we all got this sorted out was that he did, he's been so, not to embarrass you, but he's been so stressed out dealing with all this shit. I don't want to, I really want to get this resolved because I don't want to go somewhere else and be stressed out for another 4 months going to a new team. Now, eventually that could happen or whatever. You guys move around. Hopefully it never does. But, I think Dalton legitimately appreciates.
Yeah, you've been around there for so long with this team now that I find it interesting because in the free agency process, there'd be years where this club would have been making the sales pitch that other clubs are because the culture wasn't here yet. Or we're going to build it, and now that it's here, you don't have to worry about trying to convince somebody on that anymore. But I've known and been covering this league for a long time that other teams will get on the phone with a guy like you and say, "Don't go there. That's a horrible team. That guy's a piece of crap to coach." Like they do a lot of kind of sabotaging.
I try not to do that. I try not to do that with guys that come to me with wanting my opinion. I try not to shit on other teams.
Well, it does happen though, and you know it.
It does happen. Oh, for sure it happens. I don't know. I mean, unless it's brought up specifically, I think. You
would know when it's genuine, right?
Yeah,
I think
kind
of your bullshit meter is
right, and I think from Darren's standpoint, his word means a lot, and so he's not gonna trash on other teams or tell a guy not to take a deal that would truly be a good situation for them, because that's how he's built the trust with all the players on this team, and so I know I can take his word and he'll tell me what's what.
It happens though. There's no question it happens, and
yeah.
Sometimes it's real. Sometimes they aren't great situations, but you also have ways of wording it.
But remember though when you were, it wasn't that long ago when this was the hardest sell in the league.
100%. I can remember. Like this is a while back, but like trying to get a quarterback in here, Kyle was every guy he would call. It was no, we're going here. Zach was one of those guys, and I don't blame him at the time. At the time, he made the right decision. At the time, now things change, and now it's more so from our standpoint. It's how do you pay everybody? That's the issue. When you have the best roster in the CFL, it's keeping them isn't really from a culture standpoint isn't the challenge. It's how do you make it work? And look, our CEO is a huge help in that regard. I don't know that we would have been able to resolve some of these things had he not got involved. So I'm sure he'll be pissed that I said that, but it's just the truth. So anyway, so let's. I
was going to say now that it's done though, I see you decked out in this stuff. I can't even imagine you in a different color, right? It doesn't.
Yeah. No, I think that was definitely something on my mind as well because I told this to Darren earlier. I couldn't see it with really any other team. Like I couldn't, like you just said, imagine myself in another city, wearing another team's colors, playing for another team. I think my parents have spent a ton of money at the Bomber store for everyone in my family, cousins and everybody included. Got my grandpa wearing all the Winnipeg gear all the time. So they would have been a little disappointed if I would have been like, hey, we got to go buy new gear for a new team. But like you said, it didn't really make sense in my mind to see myself anywhere else.
Yeah. To close this out, one of the things that we all kept coming back to, and ultimately, Kyle signs off and makes the decisions and all this stuff, but you try and fill your organization, and this comes from Wade all the way down, with people that are good human beings, and he also happens to be really good at football. And everyone says, well, he's he's a great player and an even better person. Fuck you. And people say that about everyone. But in his case, it's legitimately true. So it's, you were going to lose, you had the risk of losing not only the football aspect, we were talking about this earlier. The football aspect's one thing. You almost that almost gets forgotten when you're trying to have these conversations. You're figuring all this out because you want the person back as much as anything else too, So
that's a good way to put it. Handled internally, brought to you by PlayNow.com. Bomber fans, PlayNow.com reminds you that when you bet on blue, there's only one legal online sportsbook in Manitoba, only one that guarantees your winnings, and only one where the profits stay here to support your community. Play your Bombers at PlayNow.com, your hometown sportsbook. Enjoy responsibly. And now, on to the show.
Let's go a little bit back just to K-State days a little bit. We talked about this when we had John before, but so you were obviously the story's kind of well documented, the walk on, all that stuff. But even previous to going there, you were firing off emails or letters to coaches like every week or something to get what? Were you in high school at this point?
Yeah, so this was back when I was in high school. This is kind of speaking to the whole point too, where I said it was weird for me to be recruited kind of at a high level like that because I'd never experienced that. So basically, going into my senior year of college, I'm looking at a lot of like Division II type football programs just because that's kind of where I was at as a player in terms of what I had done on the field to that point. But I also knew I wanted to major in mechanical engineering just based off my interests and, where I was at in school and stuff like that. And so I was actually looking at a lot of Division III programs as well because they weren't as good football-wise, but they were really good schools and stuff like that. The engineering programs were a lot better. But then I went out, first game my senior year. I might have mentioned this on the last podcast, but had 12 catches for 380 yards and 4 touchdowns. And this is, 6A Kansas football. The team it was against actually was a undefeated state champion team. We lost the game, but you put up those stats and you're like, well, maybe I could play at a higher level than Division III,
Right.
Division II. And so I'm sending my film to. I send it to every coach because usually you go to camps all summer going into senior year, and they're like, oh, send us your 3-game highlight tape after the year starts. I sent in that tape after one game. I was like, this one game is going to be better than anyone's 3-game. I guarantee it. And you get a mixture of responses. It's kind of that, oh, we're interested, but we don't have any scholarships left, all this stuff. And K-State, I grew up a huge K-State fan. They were one of those teams that said, man, like this film's great, but we don't have any scholarships left. Sorry. And I was like, no, I just want to be a walk-on. Like I just want to be on the team. I'm confident if I get my foot in the door, I can work my way up because K-State's had a pretty good tradition of that. And it's funny because our recruiting coordinator at the time, and he's still there as the recruiting coordinator, he told me, no, we're good. And I was like, screw this guy. So started emailing all the coaches on staff, finally got the receivers coach to watch my film. This is like months later. We're like into basketball season at this point. And he's kind of similar, like, oh, I like your tape. Like you do some good stuff, but the room's too full, all this stuff. And it got to the point where I'm sending them emails every week, pretty much just peppering them with highlights. I'm trying to highlight other things like what I do off the field, classroom-wise, student-wise. I think I sent a basketball highlight. I was like, I'll show them I'm athletic in general.
Yeah.
And so it was a long process. And, K-State was slow playing it for so long that I was talking to some other schools too, some other Division I's to walk on with similar, like, good engineering programs, good football programs, as well as looking at seriously some D3 programs that were just really good engineering schools. And the football would have been what it was, not great.
So when you were when you're a senior in high school, and I read a story that every student had to take a picture with their shirt on of where they're going, and you used K-State even though you hadn't heard anything from them.
It was I hadn't so it was like our senior class pictures of high school, and I don't know who decides this type of stuff, but they were like, everyone wear a shirt of where you're going to college. And it's like April, like, so everyone knows where they're going except me. Like, people are talking to me constantly, like, where are you going to go next year? Like, family.
And you're hanging on to K-State.
I was hopeful because at that point, I think I had been up to like an unofficial type visit at they had a spring football practice or whatever that I talked to the receivers coach pretty extensively, and then I talked to the quarterbacks coach at the time who was like the recruiter of the Kansas City area and stuff like that. But they kind of just kept saying like, hey, man, as a walk-on, it's just a numbers thing, which you never know if that – is it really a numbers thing or are you just trying to let me down easy? Which is it, man?
Yeah.
And so, we took that class picture, and I told everyone, like, oh, I just happened to be wearing K-State that day. But in my mind, I knew I was like, I'm hopeful that this is going to work out.
So did you have a Colorado School of Mines as a backup or something?
I did not have any Colorado School of Mines gear, actually, and didn't really have any gear of any other school.
Okay.
Just like I said, I grew up K-State through and through, and so there was really similar to this. In my mind, there was no other option, but when push came to shove, we had to look at other options. I actually ended up also taking a visit down to Oklahoma State, and they offered me a preferred walk-on spot there. And so, you're looking at that pretty seriously, and then finally K-State came through end of April. Like I said, everyone knows where they're going to school already, and they were like, yes, we would have a walk-on spot available if you're interested. I'm on the phone. I'm like, yep, I'll take it. And they're like, you don't want to talk to your family or think about it? I was like, nope, I'll take it. I was worried if I hung up, they might change their mind. So I had to get locked in right then and there.
So when you finally get in a game, is your first catch a 70-yard touchdown?
Yeah. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, but my path was different than most. Like I said, K-State had a good tradition of, walk-ons ended up playing. But when I got there, I learned very quickly it was going to be tough because you kind of have this idea of like, oh, if I just work hard and pay my dues, like eventually, I'll move up the ranks. and you think that that's how it's going to work, and then you realize, how many opportunities are given to other guys before you. And like our coaches, though, they recruit their guys, and so they're always going to give their guys the opportunity first. And so as a walk-on, I'm doing everything I can. I'm trying to learn from the older walk-ons in the program who are saying, like, do this, this, and this, and this is kind of the blueprint to how you get on the field. And I'm winning sprints in winter conditioning, and coaches don't say a word. And so it's tough when that's happening. And then,
was there ever a point where you just said, like, fuck, this is not going to work?
I mean, there was definitely a lot of points where that was whispering at the back of my mind for sure. Because like I said too, I was a scout team guy for 2 years. And I don't think there's a lot of guys who have gone through K-State and played scout team legitimately for 2. Because like a lot of guys will do it as a redshirt, but then the next year you're either playing special teams, you're playing in some capacity. You might not be starting, but you're playing. You're not on scout team anymore. But I was legitimately on scout team for 2 years, and in my mind I was killing it on scout team too. So I'm like, at some point someone's got to notice. Like this is crap. Like we would run the same play over and over and over again and score a touchdown 4 times in a row. Granted, my quarterback on scout team, his name's Skylar Thompson. He's with the Dolphins right now, and so he was a great player too. And so finally going into my redshirt sophomore year, so my 3rd year I've been there now, my goal is I got to play special teams. I got to just get a spot on the bus. Like I got to be there. And so it was the first game going into my sophomore year. I'm starting on all 4 special teams, so I'm doing that. And I'm playing a little bit at receiver. I mean, truthfully, I was probably like the 8th receiver on the depth chart at that time. But we had a guy who was hurt, and I think another guy who might have been suspended for a game or two. And so it was basically like when we went 4 wide, which down there and with my team, we hardly ever did. When we went 4 wide, I was going in every other series. So I'm hardly playing. But I'm out there. And nearing the end of the first half, we actually checked to a play that we had run earlier in the first half, and I'd had a conversation with our quarterback about it at the time. I was like, man, they did this. I ran my route like that, wide open. They checked the play. I look at the quarterback. I was like, it's going down. He didn't even look at me, but I knew he knew. And, yeah, he put it out there, caught it, didn't even know what was happening.
Was this at home?
This was at home,
oh,
yeah.
Shit.
Ran. I mean, man, I've been growing up going to games my whole life.
Yeah.
When the ball was in the air, it was like,
okay.
It was like time stopped.
Yeah.
But I caught it, immediately changed my angle because I was like, I cannot get caught right here. I gotta score.
Yeah.
And I did end up scoring, and didn't even know how to react because it's like you're so in shock.
Right.
Like I had
childhood dream.
Yeah. Childhood dream that I don't even think I dreamed of scoring. I dreamed of playing.
Just getting on the field. Yeah.
And your first catch goes for a 70-yard
Family's
touchdown.
there.
Everyone's there.
Oh.
Because that's part of why I grew up such a huge K-State fan is that's what my family did. Like, it's similar to Bombers games. It's every weekend, the whole family's going, and that's where we're seeing cousins from all across the state, all across the country at these games. And so they're all there because they know I'm going to play, too, a little bit. But
your parents come up for every game, right?
Here? Not every game, but
most
a decent
games?
amount. Yeah, I mean,
they drive up.
Yeah, that's kind of the fortunate part about being from Kansas City and playing here is like it's a 12-hour drive, which I was just talking to Ed about. It's a long drive, but if you have other people, it's really not bad.
Yeah.
It's
your dad,
probably quicker than flying most times.
Yeah.
When your dad and mom sat down with us last year, your dad told a funny story about when they first came up. They're at the border crossing, and the guy saying, "What's your son's name?" And it's Dalton Schoen. Oh, okay. But then as the season comes on, hey, you're Dalton's mom and dad. Come on, come to Canada.
It's funny how quickly things can change. Yeah. And,
you just one more thing about K-State. You got to be so proud about just sticking to it, right? Because as Darren said, there's probably moments. But Coach Snyder had, what is it, the pillars or the
He has the 16 goals for success. Yeah.
There's a couple that really resonated with you, right?
Yeah. There's number 12, no self-limitations. And it's something that, like, I was like, this is me. And, I mean, so, like I said, growing up a K-State fan, my dad had obviously given me those goals at a young age. And, you memorize them, you're living life by them, you're trying to do right. But then speaking to what I did about my high school story, it's like, all right, everyone said I couldn't even get an opportunity at a D1 program, and now I did. I'm here. And then everyone's saying, oh, you'll never play. But it's like, well, I did this one thing. And so then you keep working, and then you're like, all right, well, I'm on the field. And they're like, okay, well, you're never going to actually play receiver. You're not going to be a starter. well, I keep believing in myself, no self limitations, and kind of just each step of the way you keep ticking that next box. And so that's something that's kind of driven me for quite some time.
And your brother was a walk-on too, right? For the basketball
Yeah, my brother
team.
was on
That's
the
so
basketball
wild
team as a
that
walk-on. It was
you guys have it in your blood.
it was the golden years for my parents there for a little bit when my brother was on the basketball team and I was on the football team, and they had tickets to every game and just living life.
So this whole kind of chips stacked against you thing. So you come up here. Do you remember how you found out about? Like I remember the contract coming in. It was like in April, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was April, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Danny, I think it was Danny that signed you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know anything about Winnipeg at all, or
Not really. No. So Danny, well, I think my agent called me maybe in like January or February, kind of floated the idea, and he was like, "Hey, there's this team in Canada. One of their scouting guys saw you when you were in training camp with the Chiefs and all that stuff." And he was like, "I just want to put this on your radar and just think about it." So I started thinking about it, and then keeps pushing it a little bit. He's like, "Hey, let's just set up a call with the three of us, me, you, and Danny. Danny will just talk to you about like life, as an American in the CFL, how that all works."
do you know Danny's background at all?
Yeah, well, I'd done some research, and through that conversation, because at the time I really didn't. And so then I'm talking to him just, and again, about general CFL stuff, not necessarily about coming up and stuff like that.
Legendary
Yes.
quarterback, legendary beer drinker, legendary everything. Yeah,
Legendary CFL.
and pretty good
right
damn
there.
guy at finding players too.
Yes.
Sorry
and
to cut you
so,
off. Go ahead.
No, yeah, he just kind of mentioned like, "Hey, I saw you in training camp with the Chiefs, like what you did, all this stuff. It was like, we would love to get you up here." And so started, kind of seriously thinking about it, and I asked him obviously a ton of questions. Number one, where's Winnipeg?
Yeah.
But when I Googled it, I was like, oh, that's literally straight north of Kansas City. That's similar culture and vibes and stuff like that. And so, and really not that far. When I was actually looking, I was like 12 hours driving. I go to Colorado all the time. That's 10 hours driving. So that's kind of when I started seriously looking at it. But then, we were still looking at some other options from an NFL standpoint at that time. I actually ended up doing pro day again for my college just because my quarterback, the one I mentioned earlier, he wanted me to run routes for him so he could throw and get his best looks and stuff like that. And so I ended up doing all of that and kind of chasing down all the NFL leads we had at the time. And then it was getting to about April, and Danny and whoever is in charge of this stuff is kind of saying, "Hey, we need to know like now or never if you're going to sign." And so my agent's kind of like, "Hey, you've been out 2 full years now. You've been with a few NFL teams, but you haven't played at all. Like let's go get some stats, get some film, and do all this stuff, and then we'll regroup from there." And so I was like, all right, I pulled the trigger, decided to sign. It was right at the beginning of April. And then they proceeded to sign like 12 receivers after that. And I was like, all right, so it definitely wasn't do or die time when you said it was.
No.
But yeah, I remember driving up here.
So were you YouTube? Did you YouTube like Winnipeg and CFL? Like how did you just
well,
come up, like
one of the first things my agent sent me was the stadium, and he was like, "This is a really good stadium for a CFL team." And then you then go to YouTube, watch some games. I had seen games before, not necessarily Winnipeg per se, but you'd seen games of the CFL game, and at the time, I don't know why, I thought one person could move. I didn't realize everybody was just moving right before the play. But yeah, you YouTube some games, see like, okay, how am I going to fit into this system, stuff like that. It wasn't until after I'd signed and got like a playbook that I realized there was 12 people on the field. And I was like, oh, an extra spot, I guess. So that's cool. Yeah. But then I'm driving up for training camp. Obviously never been to Canada. I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? I'm looking at the roster. There's like 120 guys on the roster. I'm reading it on the internet. We got to cut down to like 85 in like 2 days.
Doing some math.
Yeah, I'm doing some quick math. That's like rule number one they teach you in the NFL training camp is don't start looking around and doing the math on cuts. But it's hard not to, especially as a player. And then you're coming up here, and like I said, there's 25 receivers on roster. I'm like looking at the roster, like it's a 45-man active roster. There's probably like, there's 5 starting receivers, maybe 1 or 2 backups. Don't even know if those guys are American.
Buddy, I remember one morning I was riding the bike out like in the hallway, and you came by. We obviously didn't know each other at that point, really.
Yeah.
And I just said, made small talk. Oh, how you doing? And at that point, I knew that you were making the team. I don't know if you had known that. Yeah, it's not really. No, at that point, we didn't.
I didn't
We weren't.
know.
We didn't have the relationship we do
My
now.
bags were packed. I was ready.
So, but you had said like, oh man, there's a lot of receivers here, and like, I guess there is like, I don't know, 20 something probably at training camp. Like that's pretty daunting for a rookie and one spot. It's not like you were coming into a shitty team that needed a bunch of players.
Right. No doubt. Like I had obviously looked at the roster who had been here the year before, and Greg's coming in. He's a player who's done it in this league before. It's like he's going to be a starting receiver. And so there's not a lot of spots to be had, and I tell people this all the time. I think it might come off the wrong way. You almost have to get lucky in a sense, and not necessarily from like how you're producing, but to get your foot in the door and get the opportunities. Because I think back to like that rookie camp that year, and it just so happened to be that like they put me in a room with a quarterback. So then every rep he's in there, he's throwing me the ball like every time. And there's 5 receivers out there. And then I'm sitting by Drew Brown in the meeting room because I knew he'd been here the year before. And so I'm trying to pick his brain about everything. And so he starts to develop that relationship with me. And now he's throwing me the ball like on every play because we're out there with a bunch of rookies who don't know what they're doing. And I think about those reps, and those probably helped get my foot in the door a little bit more, turned some coaches' heads being like, okay, wait, this guy could maybe play a little bit. And maybe without those experiences, it doesn't end up being what it's being. Because then I also think back to once real training camp opens, I'm with the threes, like firmly in the third group of receivers going in there. And it's going to be really hard to make the team from the threes because I've been with a lot of NFL programs where the threes get 4 reps of practice. But I do think that those experiences kind of help prepare me for that. And you realize that it's kind of a long-term battle. Training camp is a war of attrition. You got to just kind of bide your time, keep doing what you can with those reps, because after a couple days, you're with the 2s. And then 2 days later, Greg Ellington gets hurt. I'm with the 1s in his spot.
Right. I was going to say something happened because you and I talked about this at some point, like about I hate to say luck, like that's just a shitty term, but like there is some element to it.
Some things have to fall your way.
Did you play both preseason games?
I did, yeah. So
But you're also, I think you're underselling your ability to grind, and that's your whole career, right?
No, for
because
sure.
you came, and I remember talking to your folks again, and they said that you might not have been aware of the waggle, but you had studied it, and that's something that Coach O'Shea said.
Yeah.
Right from the first day of rookie camp, he understood the waggle, where other guys are trying to figure it out.
I thought it was pretty obvious.
There's definitely those
the grind. You knew how to grind.
Yeah, that's why, like I said, I don't like using the term lucky, but you do have to get that in a sense to get your foot in the door. Now, once you get that break or that luck, whatever you want to call it, you have to have been prepared. And that's where, from talking with actually Danny, but before coming over for training camp, he was like, make sure you're comfortable with the waggle, make sure you're in the best shape of your life because you're going to be running a lot.
I think the luck thing is like the issue is we only have 2.5 weeks training camp. Yeah. There's only 2 preseason games, and one of those games,
rookie camp's 3 days.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like there just isn't a lot of time to show.
Right. But I do think it goes back to that whole being prepared and
for sure
not getting overwhelmed and not doing the math. That'd be my advice to anyone coming into training camp up here, because like I said, I was with the 3s at the start of training camp. They also had me at Y, which is a spot where we're starting a Canadian receiver. So it's like I can't even play this position. But like I said, a couple days go by, someone gets hurt, now I'm with the 2s. You make some more plays, and then Greg Ellington gets hurt. He's playing R. I don't even know that spot. But they shuffled me over there, and they're like, you know this, right? And I was like, yes.
Sure.
But in my mind, I was kind of like, do I?
Yeah.
But then, like I said, you just trust that you're prepared enough, and you do know it, and those other guys in there are going to help you out and stuff like that. But you got to be ready for that moment, because it was at that moment that they trusted me more than those other rookies to put in that spot with the 1s, because now you're going with Zach, who's coming off 2 straight Grey Cups. It's like we can't put someone who doesn't know what they're doing in there. That level of preparedness and – whether it was physical, mental, all of that stuff kind of leads to that moment. But without certain breaks, it probably is a different story.
It's so, I mean, you talked about getting to that spot, the R spot, and kind of saying, yeah, I know how to play it. And you know what it's like, it's an instant audition then, right? Mm-hmm. Because you've got Zach throwing you passes, and if you take it outside when you're supposed to go inside, then you're getting him pissed off. Mm-hmm. Everybody sees it on film. So, again, I think it comes back to the grind, because preparedness matters.
And maybe it is one of those situations where you make your own luck and you attribute it to luck or a break, but it's really because you were actually prepared. I think back to my days at K-State and kind of that similar story arc of it was going into that second year, that training camp, my fall of my sophomore season. there was a point in time where our coach, I literally remember our receiver coach just stops the tape because I was catching the ball wide open for a touchdown. He's like, "Are you just paying them to not cover you?" He's like, "This just only happens to you." And I was like, I don't know. Like it does just happen. I don't know. You can't really describe it. And maybe it's just all of those things coming together of like, hey, I was prepared. I worked hard. I was grinding, like you said, and it's just all coming together nicely. Don't know what it is, but it's kind of happened multiple times in my career, and I'm thankful for that kind of story of having to grind it out for that opportunity, because if I hadn't gone through that in college, I don't think I would have been prepared for it here.
Absolutely. It's all intertwined, right? And I know, and maybe you get tired of it, but the street dog story is so cool to me because, that's, and again, your dad said it, the real street dogs that he saw in his farming town, they don't know where their next meal's coming from. Right. So they got to grind, and that's.
And that was the whole mentality of, I was with the 3s, all right, now I'm with the 2s, now I'm with the 1s, I got to grab it and take it and never give it back. And there hasn't been a time that I haven't been in the starting lineup since that. Right. And so you got to keep fighting and clawing every single day. But as soon as you see a sliver of a scrap, that's got to be yours.
So then how do you keep that edge when, and here you are, you're 2-time CFL All-Star, have, 26 touchdowns in 34 games, I think it is?
Yeah.
How do you, it would be easy for some people to throw their feet up and say, I'm here, I'm arrived.
I think you never really forget or get over those days where you were the bottom of the totem pole. Like, I can think back to a specific time at K-State where we're running one-on-ones and there's a certain DB who I won't name, but he's now in the NFL, who would not go against me because he didn't think I was good enough at a certain time in my career. I'm not going to do that. But I can remember very specifically one day we're going 2-minute drill. And this is actually when I was still with the 2s at K-State, or I might have been running with both groups. I told the backup quarterback, I said, just give me a fade on him first play. Torched him, 80-yard touchdown. And I'm like, but you won't go against me in one-on-ones because I'm not good enough? Like, come on, man. And so you don't forget those type of moments.
Sure.
And so in my mind, I'm not at that level. I still am that walk-on. I still am that street dog. And I got to keep fighting for everything I'm going to get, or else it's going to be gone.
I was going to transition to this season, but he kind of just touched on it. We're moving forward. You're nothing's changing except you're not surprising anybody anymore anyway. You weren't last year.
Yeah, so. I think I did touch on this going into this last season because obviously it was different going into year 2 than it was year 1. And like Ed said, it is sometimes hard. You are a little worried, I guess, about losing that edge or that mentality of like, I have no problem my first year finding the energy because you have to keep going. Like, you can't afford to take stuff off. And so what you lose in that respect, I think you more than gain in the fact that you're comfortable in the offense. Like, you can truly treat training camp as an experiment of how do we get better as an offense? How do we innovate? How do you just keep developing that timing with the other receivers, with Zach and all of that kind of stuff? And I think when your starting point is so much higher as a second-year guy or a third-year guy, there's just all that much farther you can go if you just keep getting a little bit better every day compared to – you're starting at the bottom of the totem pole, you're scrapping, you're fighting, all of a sudden you're in the starting lineup week 1 and you barely know the guys around you. That was a weird spot to be in for sure.
How do you this sounds like I'm doing an interview for a job here, but where do you see yourself in, say, 2-3 years? Or do you really have to live like in the moment and it's go 1-0 this week or whatever? I know that's kind of cliche, but like if you stay here, you could be. There's a legacy thing that could happen.
I think, obviously, hopefully, I'm still here. That's obviously the goal. But I think the nature of this profession, and it might be even more pronounced in this league, is you can only really look 1 year at a time. Or there are certain guys who have that 2-3 year type deals. But it's a lot of 1 year deals and a lot of one year at a time. And I think it's something that Osh says all the time. Usually, actually, at the end of the year. The team's never going to look the same from 1 year to the next. I don't think there's ever been a team that's had the exact same roster from 1 year to the next. There's always going to be those guys retiring, those guys leaving to other teams, new rookies coming in that we're going to have to count on to step up. And so you can't really look past the year in a sense. And I like how you said it. You can't look past 1 week at a time. It's just all about how do I prepare to be my best each week and go out there and do my job.
There was a 2-year contract discussed briefly, but by that point, everyone was going to pull their hair out. So it was just like we're like, fuck it,
I think you mentioned that
let's
too,
just
yeah.
stick with the one, and we'll deal with this
I-
at the end of the
I
season.
think we were so excited just to have the 1 year done. Yeah, we're like, we'll figure this out later. That's classic procrastination
yeah,
right there.
yeah, there you go. All right, brother. Thanks so much,
Yeah,
man. I
thanks,
appreciate
Dalton.
this.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy the
Thanks, guys.
weekend.
Right on.